The winter storm had begun earlier than anyone expected, and by the time it reached the small mountain town, the wind was already howling like a wild animal. Snow covered the streets in thick layers, making it difficult for anyone to walk without slipping. Most people stayed indoors, close to their fireplaces, praying the storm would not get worse. But one person had no choice except to stay outside. Her name was Hannah, a young nurse who had lost her job at the small clinic only 2 weeks ago. She had been trying her best to survive the harsh season, but things were getting harder every day. Hannah walked slowly along the snowy road, pulling her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. The cold bit into her skin, but she tried not to think about it. She had spent the day looking for any kind of work, cleaning, helping in a store, sewing, anything, but no one had anything to offer. The storm had kept customers away, businesses closed early, and the town became silent before sunset. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days, only biting on small leftovers she found in her room. Even those were nearly gone now. Her body felt weaker than usual. Her steps became slower, and her breath came out in small white clouds. But she kept walking, because stopping meant freezing. She told herself she only needed to reach her small rented room, heat a little water, and rest until morning. Tomorrow would bring another chance. She repeated this in her mind over and over again, the way someone repeats a prayer. As she reached the forest road, the wind pushed snow across the path, forming little hills she had to climb over. She knew this route well, it was a shortcut back home. But tonight, it looked different. The trees were shaking, and visibility was low. Still, Hannah did not want to take the longer road. The storm was getting worse, and she wanted to reach home before she collapsed from exhaustion. She placed her hand on the nearest tree to steady herself. When she lifted her head, something caught her attention. At first, she thought it was only a shadow, maybe a large rock or a fallen branch. But then she heard a sound, an anxious, distressed sound. It came again, louder this time, almost like a cry. Hannah blinked, trying to see through the snow. A dark figure moved between the trees. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from alarm. She stepped closer and realized it was a horse. A big brown horse, covered in snow, pacing in circles, tossing its head as if trying to call for help. Her confusion turned to concern. Horses did not act like that unless something was very wrong. Slowly, Hannah approached the animal, speaking softly to calm it. The horse snorted in fear at first, its breath puffing out white clouds. But when Hannah placed her hand on its neck, it stopped pacing. It lowered its head slightly, allowing her to touch it. That was when she saw the shape on the ground, a man lying half buried in snow. Her body turned cold with shock. She hurried to the man's side and brushed snow away from his face. His skin was pale, lips turning blue, and his eyes were half open but unfocused. She recognized the signs immediately. Severe hypothermia. His leg appeared twisted, like he had fallen or been thrown from the horse, and he had not been able to stand up again. For a moment, Hannah stared at him, the cold wind hitting her back, telling her she should run and find someone stronger to help. But she knew she didn't have time. Hypothermia was deadly. If she left him here alone, he wouldn't survive until she returned. Hannah took a deep breath, letting her training take control. Even though she had no job now, she was still a nurse at heart, and she could not leave anyone in danger. She gently lifted his head, checking his pulse. It was slow, but present. She shook his shoulder lightly, calling out to him, trying to keep him awake. His eyes fluttered, but he couldn't speak. She felt her own hands trembling, not only from the cold but from fear. She was already weak from hunger, and she knew dragging him would take everything she had left. But she refused to give up. Nearby, she saw an old wooden shed half broken by time. She pulled the man's arm over her shoulder and began to drag him slowly toward the shed. Her legs shook under his weight. The cold air stung her lungs, and her vision blurred. But she kept moving, inch by inch. After what felt like an eternity, she reached the shed. She pushed the door open with her shoulder and pulled him inside. The wind howled outside, but the shed blocked most of it. She lowered him gently against one wall, breathing heavily. Hannah knew she needed to warm his body. She took off her scarf, wrapping it around his neck. She placed her gloves on his hands and rubbed his arms to create friction. He opened his eyes for a moment, his gaze confused. Hannah leaned closer so he could see her face. "Stay awake," she whispered softly. "I'm here. You're not alone." His lips moved, trying to say something, but no sound came out. She placed her hand on his cheek, feeling how dangerously cold it was. She knew she had to use body warmth to help him. It was the only way in situations like this. She held his hands between hers, warming them slowly. She removed her coat and placed it over his chest, ignoring her own shivering. She pressed her body close enough to share warmth, but far enough to keep everything safe and respectful. She checked his breathing again and again, making sure it never slowed too much. The storm outside grew louder. Snow piled against the shed walls. Hannah could hear the wind shaking the wood, but she didn't let fear take over. She kept whispering to him, telling him small stories about her life, hoping her voice kept him anchored. She told him how she became a nurse because she liked helping people. She told him how she dreamed of working in a big hospital one day. She didn't mention her struggles, her hunger, or how lost she felt. She wanted her voice to sound steady, something he could hold on to. Hours passed. Her fingers felt numb. Her stomach twisted painfully from hunger. But every time she looked at the cowboy's pale face, she found strength again. He was breathing more evenly now. His pulse felt a little stronger. She let out a soft sigh of relief. She knew she had made the right choice, staying with him. As dawn approached, the storm began to calm. Light filtered through the cracks of the shed. Hannah knew this was her chance. If she stayed here longer, he would survive, but she might not. She needed to bring help now that the weather was a little better. She stood slowly, almost falling because her legs were stiff and weak. She placed his hand gently on his chest. "I'm going to get help," she whispered. His eyes opened again, only slightly. There was confusion and fear in them. His fingers twitched, as if trying to reach her. Hannah gave him a small, soft smile. "You're going to be okay," she said. "Just stay awake. I won't let anything happen to you." She turned toward the door, wrapped her thin coat around herself, and stepped out into the cold morning snow. The wind was quieter now, but the cold was still sharp. She looked up at the mountains, knowing the ranches were somewhere beyond the ridge. It would take hours to reach them on foot, especially in her weak state. But she had no choice. Someone needed help, and she was the only person who could get it for him. Hannah took a deep breath, placed one foot in front of the other, and began her long walk through the snow. Her body trembled with every step, but she refused to stop. She had saved his life through the night, and now she would save him again by finding help before it was too late. Behind her, in the small shed, the cowboy lay unconscious, but breathing alive, because of her courage, warmth, and kindness. And though he didn't know her name yet, he would remember her face forever. The sound of crackling fire was the first thing Luke became aware of. For a long moment, he could not understand where he was. His eyelids felt heavy, his body stiff, and his mind foggy, as if he had been asleep for days. When he tried to move his leg, a sharp pain shot through it, forcing him to groan softly. That small sound brought everything back in a rush: the snow, the darkness, the fall. And the last thing he faintly remembered: a soft voice telling him to stay awake. He opened his eyes fully, blinking until the room came into focus. He was inside a warm cabin, wrapped in thick blankets, with a fire burning in the stone fireplace. The smell of soup and fresh wood reached him slowly. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. But then he heard familiar voices, his ranch hands talking quietly in the next room. Before he could call out to them, the door opened. One of the ranch hands, a man named Bennett, stepped inside with a surprised look on his face. "You're awake," Bennett said with relief. "Thank goodness. We were starting to worry." Request. We were starting to worry. Luke swallowed, his throat dry. "What happened?" Bennett pulled a chair close to the bed. "You fell off your horse during the storm. We found you early this morning. But you didn't just get lucky. A woman came all the way from the ridge to get help. She saved your life." Luke frowned slightly as he tried to remember. A woman? He closed his eyes for a moment, seeing a blurred memory of someone leaning over him, whispering that he wasn't alone. When he opened his eyes again, he felt a strange ache in his chest. "Where is she?" he asked quietly. Bennett shook his head. "She left before we got you here. We told her to wait, but she said she needed to go." Luke tried to push himself up, but his leg throbbed painfully. Bennett gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Easy there. You need rest. Your leg is sprained. Maybe worse. But you'll be fine with a few days of care." Luke wasn't listening anymore. A woman had saved him. Not just helped saved. She had walked through a snowstorm to bring help to him. The idea settled heavily in his mind, filling him with a strange mix of gratitude and worry. What kind of person risked their own life in such a storm? He lay back down, staring at the wooden ceiling. He remembered her voice, gentle but strong, trembling yet full of determination. He wished he could have thanked her. Later that day, when his pain was manageable, Luke asked Bennett again about her. This time, Bennett told him more how she arrived, shaking with cold, looking pale and weak, barely able to stand. She refused food at first, insisting they go save the man in the snow. Only after the rescue did she collapse near the ranch porch. Luke listened carefully, confusion turning to concern. She had saved him while she herself was starving and exhausted. The thought bothered him deeply. Who was she? Why was she out in the storm alone? As Bennett finished the story, Luke made a decision. "Find her," he said firmly. "I want to talk to her." But Bennett hesitated. "Luke, she didn't stay long. She looked uncomfortable, like she didn't want anyone to notice her. After she woke up, she thanked us and walked away before sunrise." Luke's jaw tightened. He had never been the type to let things go, especially not when someone had risked their life for him. In the late afternoon, when the sky began turning orange, Bennett returned with news. "We found her near the main road. She wasn't doing well." Luke tried to sit up immediately. "Bring her here." Before Bennett could answer, another ranch hand came inside carrying Hannah. She looked weak, her face pale, and her body trembling slightly. Her coat was soaked from melted snow, and she held herself carefully as if afraid of falling. Luke's breath caught. She looked so small, so thin, as if life had pushed her too hard. But her eyes were still gentle, soft, and surprisingly calm. When she saw Luke awake, she stopped in the doorway, almost looking embarrassed. Luke didn't care about his pain. He pushed himself up, ignoring the throbbing in his leg. "You saved my life, and you walked through a storm while starving. Sit down. You shouldn't even be standing." Hannah shook her head lightly. I didn't come to stay. I just wanted to be sure you were safe." But as she tried to step back, her knees wobbled. Luke moved faster than he thought he could, catching her arm gently. He felt how cold she was through her sleeve. "You're freezing," he whispered, unable to hide the worry in his voice. Bennett brought a chair close, and Luke helped her sit. Hannah kept her eyes down, as if she was afraid someone might judge her. Luke, watching her closely, understood more than she realized. Her clothes were worn, her shoes thin, and she smelled faintly of cold rain and old wood signs of someone struggling quietly. Luke ordered one of the ranch hands to bring warm soup. Hannah tried to refuse again, shaking her head. I can't take your food. I don't want to be a burden. Luke's voice softened. You're not a burden. You saved me without thinking of yourself. Let us do the same. When the soup arrived, Hannah hesitated for only a moment before taking the bowl with shaking hands. She ate slowly, almost carefully, as if afraid that eating too fast might break something inside her. Luke watched her closely, not with pity but with something deeper: respect, gratitude, and a faint feeling he couldn't name yet. When she finished eating, she placed the empty bowl on the table and looked at Luke with a shy smile. But Luke wouldn't allow it. Where will you go? You look like you haven't eaten in days. Hannah swallowed softly. I have a small room in town. I'll find work soon. What kind of work? Luke asked. Anything, she admitted. I'm a nurse. But the clinic let me go because they ran out of funds. I'll manage somehow. Luke felt a sharp, warm feeling inside, not anger, but determination. He didn't want her to manage somehow. Not after everything she had done. Not when she was clearly struggling alone. He looked at her directly, his voice calm but firm. Stay here for a while. Just until you're strong again. You don't have to go anywhere tonight. Hannah looked surprised. I don't want to take advantage. You've already done enough. Luke shook his head. You saved my life. I'm only asking you to let us help you. That's not taking advantage. That's what decent people do for each other. She looked down again, touching her hands together. Luke understood she was embarrassed, maybe even ashamed of needing help. But he also saw the exhaustion hiding behind her eyes. At last, she nodded slowly. Okay, just for tonight. One of the ranch hands prepared a spare room for her. She stood up carefully, and Luke noticed how she held the wall for support. He reached for her arm again, without thinking. Take it slow, he said softly. For the first time, Hannah met his eyes fully. Her gaze was warm, grateful, and full of something gentle that touched him deeply. Thank you, she whispered. Luke watched her walk toward the spare room, staying ready in case she stumbled again. When she disappeared inside, he let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Bennett stood beside him quietly. After a moment, he said, She's been through a lot. Luke nodded. I know. And I won't let her go through more alone. As the fire warmed the room and the storm continued outside, Luke lay back down on his bed. But this time he wasn't thinking about his injuries. He was thinking about Hannah, about her courage, her kindness, and the way she had risked everything for him. He didn't know much about her yet, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to let her walk back into the cold world alone. Not anymore. The storm did not stop the next morning. Snow still covered the land in endless white sheets, and cold winds moved through the ranch like ghosts whispering across the open fields. Hannah woke up slowly in the spare room Luke had given her. For a long moment, she did not know where she was. The room felt warm, soft light came through the small window, and the heavy blanket covering her felt much nicer than anything she had used in months. She sat up carefully, still tired but no longer shaking from hunger or cold. Her stomach felt slightly full from the warm soup she had eaten the night before, and she felt a little stronger because of it. She touched her coat folded on the chair and smiled faintly. It seemed strange that someone cared enough to give her a place to rest. When she stepped outside the room, she found the house quiet. The only sound was the low crackle of the fireplace. Luke sat in a chair near it, his injured legs stretched out, wrapped in bandages. He looked up the moment he heard her soft footsteps. You're awake, he said, his tone gentle. How are you feeling? Hannah offered him a small smile. Better than yesterday. Thank you. He shook his head lightly. You don't owe me thanks. You're the reason I'm alive right now. She looked down shyly, not knowing what to say. Luke watched her carefully. Even in her simple clothes, she carried herself with a quiet strength that impressed him deeply. He could see she was still tired, still recovering, but she stood with dignity. Hannah walked gently toward the fireplace, warming her fingers. "Do you need help with anything?" she asked. Luke chuckled softly. "I think you're the one who needs help. You should rest, eat something, maybe stay warm by the fire." But Hannah shook her head. "I can't sit and do nothing. You're injured, and I'm a nurse. Let me check your leg." She knelt beside him without waiting for permission. Her movements were soft, careful, and full of skill. Luke watched her face as she worked the focus in her eyes, the way she pressed her lips together while checking the swelling. She touched his leg gently. "It's sprained but healing. You need to keep weight off it." Luke nodded, but he was paying more attention to her than to his injury. "You saved me again." Hannah looked up, confused. "How?" "By being here," he said simply. For the first time, she blushed a little and looked away. It surprised him how much he liked seeing that small expression on her face. She stood up after finishing her check and moved around the kitchen, asking the ranch hands where things were. Within minutes, she had warm tea boiling on the stove and bread warming in the oven. The men watched her with quiet respect. They could see she was someone who worked from the heart. While Hannah prepared breakfast, Luke kept watching from his chair. Every small movement she made, the way she carefully stirred the pot, the way she moved her hair behind her ear, the way she thanked everyone softly made something grow deeper inside him. It was not fast or loud. It was slow, steady, like a warm fire spreading through a cold cabin. When breakfast was ready, Hannah set the table and helped Luke sit comfortably. She made sure his injured leg stayed supported. The ranch hands joked that they had never seen Luke sit so patiently for anything before. Hannah laughed softly at their teasing. As they ate, the men asked her kind questions. Where was she from? How long had she been a nurse? Did she always enjoy helping others? Hannah answered politely. But Luke noticed how she avoided talking about her struggles. She never mentioned hunger, being laid off, or walking through a storm without proper clothing. She only talked about the good things, the patients she liked, the moments she felt useful, the hope she still held on to. Luke's heart tightened. Someone who could see light even in darkness deserved more than she had been given. After breakfast, Hannah insisted on cleaning up, saying it helped her feel normal. She moved around the ranch house easily, her gentle presence making the place feel warmer. Luke watched from the doorway as she swept the floor, hummed a quiet tune, and smiled at the ranch dog sitting next to her feet. Later, when the storm quieted down, the ranch hands went outside to check the fences. Hannah stayed inside with Luke. He sat on the wooden couch near the fire, and she sat across from him, sewing a small tear in her coat. "You don't have to fix that," Luke said quietly. She smiled. "I've had this coat for years. I can't replace it, so I have to take care of it." Luke studied her face. She said the words calmly, but they carried a heavy story behind them, one of sacrifice, loneliness, and quiet endurance. He felt something inside his chest grow tighter, like he wanted to protect her from every struggle she had ever faced. "Hannah?" he said softly. She looked up. "Yes? You know you don't have to pretend here. If life has been hard, you don't have to hide it. If you have to hide it, you don't have to hide it." Her hands paused on the fabric. Her eyes dropped to her lap. "I don't want to be a problem," she whispered. "Everyone has their own troubles. I don't want to add mine to anyone else's life." Luke's heart squeezed painfully. He leaned forward as much as his injured leg allowed. "You're not a problem," he said firmly. "You're someone who saved a stranger without thinking of yourself. You're someone who deserves rest and kindness." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were warm, but filled with a deep loneliness she rarely showed. Luke felt a strong urge to reach out, to take her hand, to promise he would stand by her. But he held himself back, not wanting to rush anything. The rest of the day passed gently. Hannah helped Luke walk a little, holding his arm while he struggled with his balance. He felt embarrassed at first, but she treated him with such patience that he soon relaxed. They spent the afternoon talking. Hannah told him stories about her nursing training. Luke told her about ranch life, the long rides through snowy mountains, and the way he loved the peace of open land. The more they talked, the more they felt something growing quietly between them, a bond that felt natural, warm, and comforting. At sunset, Luke asked if she wanted to see the ridge behind the ranch. It wasn't far, and he could walk slowly with her help. Hannah agreed. They put on warm coats and stepped outside into the golden evening. The snow glistened like tiny diamonds under the fading sun. Hannah gasped softly at the beauty of it. Luke smiled at her reaction. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "I've never seen snow shine like this." They walked slowly together, the world around them quiet and calm. Luke noticed how small her hand felt on his arm, but how steady her presence was. He realized he didn't want the moment to end. When they reached the ridge, Hannah looked over the snowy valley and sighed. "I haven't felt peace like this in a long time," she said softly. Luke looked at her, the wind brushing her hair gently, her face glowing in the orange light. He wished he could tell her she brought peace to him just by being there. But he stayed silent, afraid he might scare her with emotions too deep, too soon. As they walked back to the house, he made a quiet promise to himself. He would not let her suffer alone again. He would not let the world ignore her kindness. He would give her a place where she felt safe, valued, and never unwanted. He didn't understand everything he felt yet, but he knew one thing very clearly. Hannah had already become important to him in a way he had not expected. And he feared the day she might say she wanted to leave. The next 2 days passed slowly, and each hour seemed to deepen the quiet bond between Hannah and Luke. The storm began to fade, leaving behind a clear sky and a soft blanket of snow that sparkled under the morning sun. Life at the ranch returned to its usual rhythm, with the ranch hands repairing fences, feeding the animals, and clearing paths. Hannah helped wherever she could, moving with gentle kindness, offering small smiles that warmed the coldest mornings. Luke felt better each day, though his legs still pained him if he moved too quickly. But he didn't mind the discomfort. What he minded, what he feared, was the way Hannah's eyes sometimes drifted toward the road leading out of the ranch. Every time he caught her staring at it, something inside him tightened. He knew she was thinking of leaving. On the 4th morning, after helping the ranch cook prepare breakfast, Hannah walked outside with a quiet purpose in her steps. She had made up her mind the night before. She couldn't stay here forever. She couldn't keep taking from people who had given her so much already. She told herself it was better to go now, before she got too comfortable, before she forgot that the world didn't always offer warm beds and kind faces. She stood by the wooden fence, looking at the open land stretching far into the distance. The sun was rising slowly, painting the snow in soft pink and gold colors. Hannah breathed deeply, trying to steady her heart. She didn't want to leave, not truly. But she felt she had to. She had come here by accident, through danger, through desperation. Staying felt wrong, like she was taking something she didn't deserve. Behind her, the front door opened, and Luke stepped out carefully. His steps were slow but steady. He spotted her by the fence and walked toward her, the cold air turning his breath into soft clouds. "You're up early," he said gently. Hannah turned, surprised. She forced a smile. "I wanted to see the sunrise." Luke knew her well enough now to see the sadness behind her smile. She had that same look when she arrived at the ranch. Soft, quiet, trying to hide her true feelings. He stood beside her, resting his hands on the fence. "Beautiful morning," he said. "Yes," she whispered. "Very beautiful." There was a long silence. Hannah's eyes drifted again toward the snowy road. Luke followed her gaze, and his heart sank. He realized the moment he had feared was coming. "You're planning to leave," he said softly. Hannah stiffened but didn't deny it. After a moment, she nodded. I should go. I don't want to depend on you or anyone else. I have to find work somewhere. I can't stay here pretending everything is fine. Luke turned to her, his voice quiet but steady. No one wants you to pretend, and no one thinks you're depending too much. You've helped more than you know. Hannah shook her head gently. You don't understand. I've been alone for so long. I've learned not to expect things from anyone. The kindness you all showed me. It feels strange. It feels like something I'm not supposed to accept. Luke's heart ached hearing this. He had seen people struggle before, but Hannah's struggle was different. It was quiet, hidden, and made of years of carrying burdens alone. He breathed deeply. Hannah, what you did for me in the snow, most people wouldn't have done that. You saved my life. You walked through a storm when you could barely stand. How can you think you don't deserve kindness? Hannah looked away again. Because it feels too good. It feels like I'm borrowing something that isn't mine. I don't want to stay here and become a problem. Luke stepped a little closer, his voice firm but gentle. You are not a problem. You're someone I'm grateful for every minute of the day. She blinked, surprised by the emotion in his voice. He went on, speaking slowly so she could hear every word clearly. The ranch feels different because you're here. Better. Warmer. And not just for me. The ranch hands smile more. The animals are calmer. The house feels alive. You bring something this place needed. Hannah felt tears gather in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. She shook her head again, her voice trembling. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, Luke cut in softly. You're the opposite of a burden. You're someone we're all thankful for. Hannah swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. She hugged her arms around herself, as if trying to keep from falling apart. Luke looked at her carefully. He had been holding something inside for days now, afraid to speak too soon, afraid to scare her. But watching her prepare to leave was more painful than anything he had felt in a long time. He finally said the words he had been keeping quiet. I don't want you to go. Hannah looked up sharply, her breath catching. Luke stepped closer, standing only a few feet from her. The morning sun cast warm light over his face, showing the sincerity in his eyes, the softness in his expression. Hannah, he said quietly, you saved my life. But you didn't just save my body. You saved something inside me. Something I thought I had lost a long time ago. When I woke up and saw you, I felt hope. And I haven't felt that in years. Hannah's eyes widened, filled with emotion she couldn't hide. Luke took a slow breath, grounding himself before he said the most important words of all. You've become important to me. More than I expected. More than I planned. You've become someone I don't want to lose. A tear slid down Hannah's cheek. She looked away briefly, overwhelmed. Her voice was soft when she finally managed to speak. Why me? Luke's answer was simple and honest. Because you're gentle. Because you care, even when no one cares for you. Because you walked through a storm to save a stranger. Because you make everything around you feel lighter. And because when I look at you, I feel like I'm looking at someone who belongs here. Round of Antiquin. Hannah covered her mouth with her hands, trying not to cry too loudly. All her life, she had carried her struggles alone. She never expected anyone to see her. Truly, see her. Luke moved closer, taking her hands gently in his. His touch was warm, steady, reassuring. You're not alone anymore, he said softly. Hannah took a trembling breath. But what if I stay and become a burden later? You won't, Luke said. And even if you struggled, even if you had hard days, I would stand beside you just the same. You helped me in my worst moment. Let me help you in yours. Let me give you a home where you feel safe. Hannah looked up at him finally, Her eyes filled with tears, but also with something tender, something she had been afraid to feel for a long time. She saw the truth in his face, felt the warmth in his hands, and for the first time in years, she believed someone's promise. She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay. Luke released a breath he didn't realize he was holding. A soft smile spread across his face, full of relief and quiet joy. He lifted one hand and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "You're home now," he whispered. "As long as you want to be." Hannah stepped closer, letting her forehead rest softly against his shoulder. Luke wrapped an arm gently around her, careful not to startle her, holding her with the respect she deserved. For a long moment, they stayed like that, two people who had found each other in the middle of winter, bound by kindness, survival, and unexpected hope. When they finally walked back to the ranch house together, side by side, the morning sun shone brighter, warming the cold land around them. And from that day forward, Hannah didn't feel alone anymore. She had found a place where she belonged, and Luke had found the person who made his world whole. They didn't rush anything, didn't force anything, they simply walked together, step by step, building a life that grew warmer with every sunrise. The starving nurse who saved a cowboy had found a home, and the cowboy who was saved had found his whole world in her.